Haven Station was the largest human-operated station in this sector of space. It served as a center for scientific research, trade, and refugee assistance. Thousands of humans and aliens lived and worked here, and the station had a reputation for being a place of fairness and compassion. But when Ben Carter stepped off his damaged ship with a paralyzed Dracorian infant in his arms, he found that even Haven Station had its limits. Commander Nate Sullivan was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been running Haven Station for 15 years, and in that time he had dealt with pirates, plagues, and political conflicts. But he had never dealt with anything quite like this. "Do you understand what you have done?" Commander Sullivan asked. They were sitting in his office, with Kira standing nearby and Ember resting in Ben's lap. The Dracorians are one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. They control trade routes that half of our colonies depend on. And you stole one of their children. "I did not steal her," Ben said calmly. "I found her in a garbage pile. They threw her away. That does not matter to them. According to their laws, she is still their property. And they want her back." Before Ben could respond, the door opened and a Dracorian walked in. She was tall and beautiful in a terrifying way, with silver scales that gleamed under the lights and eyes that were cold as ice. She wore the formal robes of a diplomat. "I am Ambassador Sithara," she said. Her voice was smooth but carried an edge of danger. "I have been sent by the Dracorian sovereignty to resolve this matter." Ember saw the Dracorian and immediately pressed herself deeper into Ben's arms, making small sounds of fear. Ambassador Sithara looked at the infant with disgust. "That creature was rightfully abandoned according to our sacred traditions. It is defective. It will never walk, never fly, never contribute to society. By taking it, you have violated our cultural autonomy and committed an act of theft." "She is not a thing," Ben said. "She is a child." "She is nothing," Ambassador Sithara replied. "In our culture, only the strong deserve to live. The weak are removed so they do not burden the rest. This has been our way for 10,000 years. Commander Sullivan held up his hand. "Ambassador, surely there must be some room for discussion here. The infant is already bonding with its caretaker. Removing it now could cause psychological harm." "We do not care about its psychology," the ambassador said. "We care about our laws and our traditions. I demand that you surrender this creature immediately." The room went silent. Everyone was looking at Commander Sullivan, waiting to see what he would decide. Ben stood up, still holding Ember. "Commander, may I say something?" Sullivan nodded. Ben turned to face the room. His voice was calm but firm. 3 weeks ago, I found this infant in a pile of garbage. She was cold, hungry, and terrified. She had been thrown away by her own people because her legs did not work. They left her to die alone in the dark. He paused and looked down at Ember, who was watching him with those big, golden eyes. "Since then, I have fed her, kept her warm, and protected her. I have watched her learn to recognize my voice. I have felt her fall asleep, listening to my heartbeat. And I have seen her begin to trust again, even after her own kind abandoned her." He looked directly at Ambassador Sithara. "You call her defective. You say she has no value. But in 3 weeks, this child has shown more courage and spirit than most people I have ever met. She did not give up. She did not stop fighting. And I am not going to give up on her either." The ambassador's eyes narrowed. "Pretty words, human, but words do not change our laws." The door opened again, and Dr. Grace Lynn walked in. She was a small woman with glasses and a determined expression. "Commander, I apologize for the interruption, but I have information that is relevant to this discussion." Sullivan gestured for her to continue. Dr. Lynn activated a display screen and showed a series of medical images. "I have been studying Dracorian physiology for many years. The type of paralysis that affects this infant is caused by a specific nerve condition. In humans, We have treatments that can repair this type of damage. With the right surgery and therapy, there is a good chance we could restore partial mobility to her legs. Ben felt his heart jump. You mean she could walk? Possibly. She would never be like other Dracorians, but she could have a much better quality of life. Ambassador Sithara made a sound of contempt. Even if your primitive medicine could help her, it would not matter. She would still be defective in our eyes. She would still be worthless. Then why do you want her back? Kira asked suddenly. If she is so worthless, why not just let her stay here? The ambassador's expression flickered for just a moment. It is not about the infant. It is about the principle. If we allow humans to interfere with our traditions, others will follow. We must maintain order. Commander Sullivan stood up. He looked at the ambassador, then at Ben and Ember, then at the floor. The weight of his decision was visible on his face. Ambassador Sithara, he said finally, I understand the importance of respecting cultural practices. I understand the diplomatic consequences of what I am about to say, but I cannot in good conscience surrender a child to people who will kill her simply because she is different. The ambassador's eyes went wide. You dare to refuse? Haven Station will not surrender this infant. She will remain under human protection. If the Dracorian sovereignty wishes to dispute this decision, they may do so through proper diplomatic channels. Ambassador Sithara stood perfectly still for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was like ice. You have made a terrible mistake, Commander. The Dracorian sovereignty will not forget this insult. There will be consequences. She turned and walked out of the room without another word. Commander Sullivan sat back down heavily. Well, he said, I suppose I just started a diplomatic crisis. Ben looked at him with gratitude. Thank you, Commander. Sullivan shook his head. Do not thank me yet. The hard part is just beginning. Ember chirped softly and reached up to touch Ben's face with her small claw. For the first time in weeks, Ben allowed himself to smile. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The cargo ship touched down on Vera 6 with a heavy thud that shook the landing platform. Ben Carter powered down the engines and leaned back in his seat. It had been a long flight from the outer colonies, and he needed fuel before he could continue to his next destination. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. The air on Vera 6 was cold and thin. The planet served as a transit hub for the Galactic Commerce Union, but very few people actually lived here. It was just a place to stop, refuel, and leave. Ben walked around his ship to check for any damage from the journey. The Wanderer was an old vessel, but it had served him well for almost 10 years. He ran his hand along the hull, feeling for cracks or dents. That was when he heard it. A weak sound came from somewhere behind the station. It was soft, almost like a bird crying. Ben stopped and listened. The sound came again, this time a little louder. It was not a bird. It sounded like something in pain. He followed the noise to a waste disposal area at the back of the station. Large containers filled with garbage and broken equipment lined the walls. The smell was terrible. Ben covered his nose and looked around. The sound came from a pile of discarded materials in the corner. Ben moved closer and pushed aside some metal scraps. What he found made his heart stop. A small creature lay among the garbage. It was about the size of a house cat, with scales that glowed a faint orange color. Its body was shaped like a dragon from old Earth stories, with small wings pressed against its back and a long tail curled around itself. The creature looked up at Ben, with large golden eyes filled with fear and pain. Ben noticed immediately that something was wrong with its back legs. They lay twisted and still, not moving even as the creature tried to pull itself away from him. Dot around the creature's neck was a metal tag with symbols Ben recognized. It was a Galactic Commerce Union identification marker. Someone had put this tag on the creature and then thrown it away like garbage. Ben felt anger rise in his chest. He had seen many terrible things in his years of traveling through space, but this was different. This was a baby, helpless and alone, left to die in a pile of trash. He carefully picked up the creature. It was lighter than he expected, and he could feel its small body shaking with fear. Ben held it close to his chest and spoke softly. "It is okay," he said. "I am not going to hurt you." The creature made a small chirping sound and pressed itself against his jacket. Ben could feel its heart beating fast. He carried the creature to the small medical clinic near the main station building. A woman with dark hair looked up from her desk when he entered. Her name tag said Kira Voss, and she wore the uniform of a medical officer. "What do you have there?" she asked, standing up to get a closer look. "I found it in the waist area," Ben said. "Something is wrong with its legs." Kira's eyes went wide when she saw what Ben was holding. "That is a Dracorian infant," she said. "Where did you find it?" "In the garbage," Ben replied. "Someone threw it away." Kira took the creature from Ben and placed it gently on an examination table. She ran a scanner over its body and frowned at the results. "The spine is damaged," she said. "This infant is paralyzed from the middle of its back down to its tail. The legs will never work. Can you fix it?" Ben asked. Kira shook her head. "I do not have the equipment here. Maybe a larger facility could try, but I cannot make any promises." The door to the clinic opened, and a tall alien walked in. He had gray skin and 4 eyes that moved independently of each other. Ben recognized him as a Volante, one of the species that managed many of the transit stations in this sector. "I am Overseer Dren," the alien said. "I received a report that you brought a Dracorian infant into this clinic." "I found it abandoned," Ben said. "Someone left it to die." Overseer Dren walked over to the examination table and looked down at the small creature. His expression showed no emotion. "This is normal," he said. "The Dracorians abandon offspring that are defective. It is their cultural practice. They believe that keeping such children alive is a waste of resources." Ben stared at the alien. "They just throw away their babies if something is wrong with them?" "It is not our place to judge the practices of other species," Overseer Dren said. "I suggest you return the infant to where you found it and continue on your way." Ben looked at the small creature on the table. It had stopped shaking and was now watching him with those big golden eyes. One of its small front claws reached out toward him. "No," Ben said. Overseer Dren's 4 eyes all turned to focus on Ben. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I'm not putting this baby back in the garbage to die. Human, you do not understand what you are doing. The Dracorians are a powerful species in this sector. If they learn that you have taken one of their abandoned offspring, there could be serious consequences." "I do not care," Ben said. He walked over to the table and gently picked up the infant again. The creature immediately pressed itself against his chest and made a soft sound of comfort. Kira watched the exchange with surprise on her face. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. "I am going to take care of it," Ben said. "I am going to find someone who can help with its legs. I am going to make sure it has a chance to live." Overseer Dren shook his head. "You are making a mistake, human. This creature was rejected by its own kind. It has no value to them." Ben held the infant closer and walked toward the door. "Maybe it has no value to them," he said. "But it has value to me." He stepped out of the clinic and into the cold air of Varith 6. The small creature in his arms looked up at him and chirped softly. Ben did not know what challenges waited ahead. He did not know if he could really help this small life he had found. But he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to let this baby die alone. The first night on the Wanderer was the hardest. Ben had no idea how to care for a Dracorian infant. He did not know what it ate, how often it needed to sleep, or even if the temperature on his ship was safe for it. The small creature spent most of the night crying. Its chirps echoed through the empty corridors of the cargo ship, and Ben stayed awake trying to comfort it. He wrapped it in soft blankets and held it against his chest. Slowly, the crying stopped, and the infant fell asleep listening to his heartbeat. When morning came, Ben found Kira Voss waiting outside his ship. "I thought you might need help," she said, holding a medical bag. "I have decided to come with you." Ben was too tired to argue. "Why?" Kira looked at the ground for a moment before answering. "I became a medic because I wanted to help people. But out here on this station, all I do is treat small injuries and fill out reports. That creature in there needs real help. And honestly, I want to know why you care so much." Ben stepped aside and let her board the ship. The infant was still sleeping in a nest of blankets Ben had made in the corner of the main cabin. "I named it Ember," Ben said, "because of the orange color of its scales." Kira smiled. "That is a good name." The journey to Haven Station would take 3 weeks. It was the nearest human colony with proper medical facilities and experts who might be able to help Ember. During the first week, Kira contacted a xenobiologist named Dr. Grace Lynn at Haven Station. Through video calls, Dr. Lynn taught them how to care for Ember. Dracorian infants needed to eat a special mixture of proteins and minerals. Their body temperature ran higher than humans, so they needed warm environments. And they formed emotional bonds quickly, especially when they were young. Dracorians are actually one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, Dr. Lin explained during one call. But their culture values physical perfection above everything else. They believe that any weakness makes an individual worthless. Children born with disabilities are abandoned because the Dracorians see them as a burden on society. "That is cruel," Kira said. "Many species would agree with you. But the Dracorians have been doing this for thousands of years. No one has ever challenged them on it." As the days passed, Ember began to change. The fear in her golden eyes slowly faded. She started to recognize Ben's voice and would chirp happily whenever he entered the room. When he sat down, she would drag herself across the floor using her front legs and climb into his lap. One evening, Ben was sitting in the pilot's seat while Ember slept on his chest. Kira came in and sat down in the co-pilot chair. "You still have not told me why you are doing this," she said. "Most people would have walked away. Why did you take her?" Ben was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "I grew up in foster care on Earth," he said. "My parents died when I was 4 years old. One spent my whole childhood being moved from one home to another. Nobody wanted to keep me. I was too quiet, or too angry, or too difficult. I always felt like I was just waiting to be thrown away again." He looked down at Ember sleeping peacefully on his chest. "When I saw her in that garbage pile, I saw myself. A life that nobody wanted. A life that someone decided was not worth keeping. I could not leave her there. I could not let her feel what I felt." Kira did not say anything. She just reached over and put her hand on his arm. Thought the trouble came in the second week. Ben was sleeping when the alarm went off. He ran to the cockpit and saw a large ship on the scanner. It was a Dracorian patrol vessel, and it was heading straight for them. "Human vessel, stop your engines immediately," a voice commanded over the radio. "You are carrying biological property of the Dracorian sovereignty. Surrender the infant and you will not be harmed." Ben's hands tightened on the controls. "Kira, take Ember and strap in. This is going to be rough. What are you going to do?" Kira asked, holding the frightened infant in her arms. "I am going to run." Ben pushed the engines to full power. The Wanderer was old, but it was fast when it needed to be. The Dracorian ship fired warning shots that passed close to the hull. "Human, this is your final warning. Surrender now, or we will disable your ship." But Ben did not answer. Instead, he activated the emergency jump drive. It was dangerous to jump without proper calculations, but he had no choice. "Hold on," he shouted. The ship shook violently as it entered the jump. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Something in the engine room made a terrible sound, and then everything went dark for a moment. When the lights came back on, they were in a different part of space. The Dracorian ship was gone, but smoke was coming from the back of the Wanderer. "We lost one of the secondary engines," Kira reported, "and there's damage to the hull." Ben nodded. "But we are alive, and we are close to Haven Station. We can make it." Ember crawled out of Kira's arms and made her way to Ben. She climbed up onto his lap and pressed her small body against him. She was still shaking from the ordeal. "It is okay," Ben whispered to her. "I am not going to let anyone take you." 3 days later, the damaged Wanderer limped into Haven Station. Ben was exhausted. Kira was worried. And Ember had grown bigger, her scales brighter, her eyes more aware. But as they docked at the station, Ben noticed something strange. People were gathered at the windows, watching their ship arrive. News drones hovered nearby, recording their landing. "What is happening?" Kira asked. A message appeared on Ben's communication screen. It was from station security. "Welcome to Haven Station. Be advised that your arrival has attracted significant attention. News of your actions has spread across multiple systems. The Dracorian Sovereignty has filed a formal complaint. Commander Sullivan wishes to meet with you immediately." Ben looked at Ember, who was watching the lights outside with wonder in her eyes. Their fight was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The consequences came faster than anyone expected. Within days of Commander Sullivan's decision, the Dracorian Sovereignty began applying pressure on every human colony that depended on their trade routes. Supply ships were delayed. Trade agreements were put on hold. Prices for essential goods began to rise. Messages started flooding into Haven Station from other human settlements. "You have put all of us at risk for one alien. Child, surrender the creature before we all suffer. This is not worth a war." Ben read these messages in his quarters while Ember slept on a heated pad nearby. Each word felt like a knife in his chest. He had never wanted to cause problems for anyone. He just could not abandon a helpless child. Kira found him staring at his communication screen with red eyes. "You should stop reading those," she said. "Some of them are threatening me," Ben said quietly. "They say if I do not give Ember back, they will find a way to take her themselves." Kira sat down beside him. "There are always people who choose fear over what is right. But there are also people who support you. Have you seen the messages from Earth?" Ben shook his head. Kira pulled up a different screen. Thousands of messages filled the display, all expressing support for Ben and Ember. People from Earth, from Mars, from colonies across human space had heard the story and wanted to help. "You are not alone in this," Kira said. "More people stand with you than against you." In the medical wing, Dr. Grace Lynn was working day and night to prepare for Ember's surgery. The procedure was risky. No human doctor had ever operated on a Dracorian before, but Grace believed she could give Ember a chance to walk. "Our nervous system is different from ours," Grace explained to Ben during one of his visits. "But the basic principles are the same. If I can repair the damaged connections in her spine, her brain should be able to relearn how to control her legs. And if it does not work," Grace looked at him with honest eyes, "then she will be no worse than she is now. But I truly believe this can help her." Ember had grown significantly in the weeks since Ben found her. She was now the size of a medium dog, and her orange scales had become brighter and more vibrant. She had learned to move around using her front legs, dragging her back legs behind her. It was difficult, but she never complained. What surprised everyone was how smart she was. Dracorians were known for their intelligence, but Ember exceeded all expectations. She understood human speech and could communicate through a combination of chirps, gestures, and facial expressions. One evening, Ben was sitting with her in his quarters when she made a sound he had never heard before. It was soft and deliberate, almost like she was trying to form a word. "What is it, Ember?" Ben asked. She looked at him with those golden eyes and made the sound again. This time, Ben understood. Fa, fa. His heart stopped. "Father," Ember said. The word was rough and broken, but it was clear. Ben felt tears forming in his eyes. He pulled her close and held her tight. "Yes," he whispered. "I am here. I am your father." The next day, a secret message arrived at Haven Station. It came through encrypted channels, hidden from normal communication systems. Commander Sullivan called Ben and Kira to his office to hear it. The message was from a Dracorian, but not from Ambassador Sithara. "My name is not important," the voice said. "What matters is that I speak for many Dracorians who do not agree with our traditions. For generations we have watched children be abandoned and killed simply for being different. We have wanted to speak out, but we were afraid. The punishment for challenging the old ways is severe." The voice paused. "But what you have done, human, has given us courage. Stories of the infant you saved are spreading through our society. Young Dracorians are asking questions that have never been asked before. Why do we abandon our children? What gives us the right to decide who deserves to live? There is a movement growing in the shadows. We are small, but we are growing. Please, do not give up. What you are doing matters more than you know." The message ended. Commander Sullivan looked at Ben. "It seems you have started something bigger than any of us realized." But before they could discuss what to do next, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Ambassador Sithra's voice came over the communication system. "Humans of Haven Station, this is your final warning. The Dracorian sovereignty demands the return of the stolen infant within 7 days. If you do not comply, we will be forced to take military action. This is not a threat. It is a promise." The station fell into chaos. People were afraid. Some demanded that Ben surrender Ember immediately. Others wanted to fight. Ben stood in the middle of it all, holding Ember in his arms, feeling the weight of every life that depended on his choice. That night, he made a decision. "I want to broadcast a message," he told Commander Sullivan. "To everyone. Humans, Dracorians, every species that can hear me. I want them to see Ember. I want them to know her story." Sullivan hesitated. "That could make things worse. Or it could change everything," Ben said. "Ambassador Sithara says Ember is worthless. But I do not think the galaxy agrees. I think if people see her, really see her, they will understand why she deserves to live." Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right. Let us show the galaxy what the Dracorians want to destroy." The broadcast went live the next morning. Ben sat in front of the camera with Ember in his lap. He told her story from the beginning. He showed her playing, learning, communicating. He showed her saying the word "father" and reaching for him with her small claws. And then he asked a simple question. "Look at her. Look at this child. The Dracorians say she is defective. They say she has no value. They say she deserves to die. But I ask you, every person watching this, does this look like a life that is worthless?" Ember looked into the camera with her golden eyes. She was not afraid anymore. She knew she was loved. The broadcast spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have predicted. Within hours, it had been viewed billions of times. And for the first time in history, the Dracorian practice of abandonment faced judgment from the entire galactic community. The response to the broadcast was beyond anything Ben could have imagined. Messages poured in from every corner of the galaxy. Species that humans had barely heard of sent words of support. Alien governments that had never taken a public position on Dracorian practices suddenly demanded answers. And within Dracorian space itself, something extraordinary was happening. Young Dracorians took to the streets in their great cities. They carried images of Ember on their signs. They chanted words that had been forbidden for thousands of years. Every life has value. Every child deserves a chance. The protests spread from planet to planet. Dracorian parents, who had been forced to abandon their own disabled children, came forward to tell their stories. Many of them had never stopped grieving. Many of them had never forgiven themselves. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dracorian sovereignty was facing rebellion from within. Ambassador Sithara tried to maintain control. She appeared on broadcasts calling the protesters traitors and demanding their arrest. She insisted that the ancient traditions must be preserved. But it was too late. The movement had grown too large to stop. 1 week after Ben's broadcast, news came that Ambassador Sithara had been recalled to her home world. The Dracorian government was in crisis, divided between those who wanted to maintain the old ways and those who demanded change. On Haven Station, Ben received the news with cautious hope. The immediate threat of military action had passed, but he knew the fight was not over. "The Dracorians are talking," Commander Sullivan told him. "Their government has agreed to postpone any action against us while they deal with their internal problems. It is not a victory, but it is a chance." That same day, Dr. Grace Lynn announced that she was ready to perform surgery on Ember. "I have done everything I can to prepare," she said. "The rest is up to her." Ben stayed with Ember until she was taken into the operating room. He held her small claw in his hand and looked into her golden eyes. "I will be right here when you wake up," he promised. Ember chirped softly and touched his face. Then she was taken away, and Ben was left to wait. The surgery took 8 hours. Ben did not move from his seat outside the operating room. Kira brought him food that he did not eat and water that he barely touched. He just sat there, staring at the door, praying to whatever power might be listening, when Dr. Grace Lynn finally emerged. Her face was exhausted, but her eyes were bright. "It worked," she said. Ben felt his legs go weak. Kira caught him before he could fall. "She will need time to heal," Grace continued, "and months of therapy to learn how to use her legs. She will never run or fly like other Dracorians. But she will walk, Ben. Your daughter will walk." When Ember woke up from the surgery, Ben was at her side. Her golden eyes opened slowly, and she looked around the room in confusion. Then she saw Ben and made a happy chirping sound. "Hey there," Ben said softly, taking her claw in his hand. "How do you feel?" Ember looked down at her back legs, wrapped in medical bandages. She wiggled them slightly, just a tiny movement, but it was movement. She looked up at Ben with wonder in her eyes. Then she said a word that made everyone in the room cry. "Father." The weeks that followed were filled with hard work. Ember had to learn to use legs that had never worked before. It was painful and frustrating, and there were days when she wanted to give up, but Ben was always there. He encouraged her when she struggled. He celebrated every small victory. He reminded her that she was strong, that she was brave, that she was loved, and slowly, day by day, Ember learned to walk. The news from Dracorian space continued to improve. The protests had forced the government to form a special commission to review their practices regarding disabled children. It was a small step, but it was a step. More importantly, Dracorian families had started reaching out to Haven Station. Parents who had been forced to abandon their children were asking for help. They wanted to know if humans could heal their lost sons and daughters the way they had healed. Ember. Ben read these messages with a heavy heart. There were too many to count. Too many children lost. Too many families destroyed by cruel traditions. But there was hope now. There was a chance to change things. Commander Sullivan called Ben to his office one morning with news. The Dracorian sovereignty has agreed to a compromise, he said. Amber will remain with you permanently. They will not try to take her back. In exchange, we agreed to share our medical knowledge with their reformers. Hopefully, we can help other children like her. Ben nodded slowly. And what about the future? Sullivan smiled. The commission they formed has already made its first recommendation. They want to end the practice of abandonment and create facilities to care for disabled Dracorian children. It will take years to implement, but the change has begun. That afternoon, Ben found Ember in the station garden. She was walking slowly but steadily on her own, exploring the plants and flowers with curiosity. Her orange scales gleamed in the artificial sunlight. Kira was watching from a nearby bench. She smiled when Ben sat down beside her. She is doing well, Kira said. She is amazing, Ben replied. Ember noticed them and walked over. Her steps were still unsteady, but she was improving every day. She climbed up onto the bench between them and looked at Ben with those golden eyes. Home? She asked. She had learned many words now, but this was her newest one. Ben looked at Kira, then back at Ember. Yes, he said. We are going to find a home. Together. A month later, the Wanderer lifted off from Haven Station. The ship had been fully repaired and upgraded with medical equipment for the journey ahead. Ben had a new mission now. He would travel to Dracorian space and help the families who were seeking to be reunited with their abandoned children. It would be dangerous work. Not all Dracorians supported the changes happening in their society. But Ben was not afraid. He had faced worse odds before. Kira sat in the co-pilot's seat, studying medical files for their first destination. She had officially joined Ben's crew, and the two of them had grown closer during their time on Haven Station. Ember sat in a special seat that Ben had built just for her, watching the stars through the viewport. She was growing fast now, almost the size of a large dog, with wings that were starting to develop properly. Ready? Ben asked her. Ember looked at him and spoke clearly. You stayed. Ben felt tears in his eyes. Those were the words she had said to him when she first learned to speak in full sentences. They had become her way of saying something important. I will always stay, Ben said. You are my daughter, and nothing in this galaxy will ever change that. The Wanderer jumped to hyperspace, leaving Haven Station behind. Ahead of them lay an uncertain future filled with challenges and dangers, but they faced it together, as a family, and somewhere in Dracorian space, other children were waiting to be found. Other lives were waiting to be saved. The work was just beginning, but that was okay, because Ben Carter had learned something important in his journey. One person could make a difference. One act of compassion could change the galaxy. All you had to do was refuse to walk away.